welcome to Bookaccino Live, a lively talk about books. It's our April edition. Austin and I just figured out this is the 10th time that we've done this. And it's been a lot of fun because I love seeing what you read. I love seeing what you're interested in after this event. So let me take it away. Got some really great books for you. First, these are your top picks from last month. Those who attended live, these were the books that you told us you were most looking forward to reading. Patty Callahan's Surviving Savannah, Lisa Scottolini's Eternal, Kate Quinn's The Rose Code, The Dictionary of Lost Words by Pip Williams, and Martha Hall Kelly's Sunflower Sisters. A quick note to those who are attending, we did an interview with Lisa Scottolini that just went up on our YouTube channel and on our podcast. And it is a fun interview because anybody who knows Lisa knows exactly how much fun she is. I mean, anyone whose author photo has a dog in it, is going to be a lot of fun to hang out with. Got a lot of insight into the book with her. And my book group is actually reading Martha Hall Kelly's Sunflower Sisters. It's a big book. And we're going to be reading it in a couple of weeks. So looking forward to that. And now with what's coming up in the next couple of weeks, start with fiction this time round. And we got What Comes After by JoAnne Tompkins. This is on sale this week. In a misty coastal Washington state, Isaac lives alone with his dog, grieving the recent death of his teenage son, Daniel. Next door, Lori, a working single mother, struggles with an heinous act committed by her own teenage son. Separated by only a silvery stretch of trees, the two parents are emotionally stranded, isolated by their great losses, until an unfamiliar 16-year-old girl shows up, bridges the gap, and changes everything. Evangeline's arrival at first feels like a blessing, but she's also clearly hiding something. When Isaac, who's retreated into his Quaker faith, isn't equipped to handle her alone, Lori forges her own relationship with the girl, and soon all three characters are forced to examine what really happened in their overlapping pasts and what it means for a shared future. So that's What Comes After by JoAnne Tompkins. Next, from Kristy Woodson Harvey, we've got Under the Southern Sky, and this is coming on April 20th. It's part of our spring preview promotion as well. The promotion where if you enter, you have a chance to win one of 5 books. It's a 24-hour contest, so you need to be on top of signing up for that newsletter, either that or checking the page every day to see if we're offering a contest. Recently separated Amelia Buxton, a dedicated journalist, never expected that uncovering the biggest story of her career would become deeply personal. But when she discovers that a cluster of embryos belonging to her childhood friend Parker and his late wife Greer have been deemed abandoned, she's put in the unenviable position of telling Parker and dredging up old wounds in the process. Parker has been unable to move forward since the loss of his beloved wife 3 years ago. He's all but forgotten about the frozen embryos. But once Amelia reveals her discovery, he knows that if he ever wants to get part of Greer back, he'll need to accept his fate as a single father and find a surrogate. This is going to be a mutual journey of self-discovery that leads them to an unforgettable and life-changing lesson. Family, the one you're born into and the one you choose, is always closer than you think. So it's pretty cover, and it takes place, yes, at the beach. Next, we've got Reunion Beach, which is a really special book. This is stories that are inspired by Dorothea Benton Frank. We all knew her as Dottie Frank, passed away a couple of years ago. And here we've got Ellen Hildebrand, Adriana Trigiani, Patty Callahan, and Mary Alice Monroe, all picking up her mantle. It's a moving anthology with these authors paying tribute to Dottie and her literary legacy. Inspired by the title she planned for her next book. One thing Dottie did know was the title of the next book. And I believe she was researching birds for it as well. The book was Reunion Beach. These close friends and colleagues channeled their creativity, admiration, and grief into stories and poems that celebrate this remarkable woman and her abiding love for the low country of her native South Carolina, a land she so brilliantly brought to life in her acclaimed novels. So I love that they're like lighting those fire sticks on the beach and celebrating Dottie, who was one of a kind. Next, from John Grisham, we've got Sooley. It's coming on April 27th. In the summer of his 17th year, Samuel Suleiman gets a chance of a lifetime. a trip to the United States with his South Sudanese teammates to play in a showcase basketball tournament. He's never been away from home, nor has he ever been on an airplane. The opportunity to be scouted by dozens of college coaches is a dream come true. During the tournament, he receives devastating news from home. A civil war is raging across South Sudan, and rebel troops have ransacked his village. His father is dead, his sister is missing, and his mother and 2 young brothers are in a refugee camp. However, Samuel has something that no other player has, a fierce determination to succeed so he can bring his family to America. He works tirelessly on his game, shooting baskets every morning at dawn by himself in the gym, and soon he's dominating everyone in practice. With the central team losing and suffering injury after injury, Sooley, as he's nicknamed, is called off the bench, and the legend begins. How far can he take his team, and will his success allow him to save his family? I actually love the cover of this book. I think it's actually stunningly beautiful, especially when it plays off the glow around the basketball and the glow of the sun setting. John is going to be doing a number of events. I know he's going to be doing one with Words Bookstore, where he's going to be being interviewed by Harlan Coben. If you want to support your indie bookstores, we'll be listing a number of these events. Make sure you sign up, buy the books from them, and be able to have a great conversation with John Grisham. And for those of you who know our long history with John Grisham, back in 1997, shortly after our site was founded, February of 1997, we hosted the first online interview with John Grisham. It was written, not spoken. There was no such thing as broadband at that point. There was no such thing as video. Think how far we've come. And we had the first ever excerpt of one of his books. So we've got a long tradition of being fans of John Grisham. Next, by Jhumpa Lahiri, we've got Whereabouts. It's also coming on April 27th. A woman questioning her place in the world wavers between the need to belong and the refusal to form lasting ties. Traversing the streets around her house and in parks, piazzas, museums, stores, and coffee bars, she feels less alone. We follow her to the pools she frequents and to the train station that leads to her mother, who is mired in her own solitude after her husband's untimely death. Among those who appear on this woman's path are colleagues with whom she feels ill at ease, casual acquaintances, and him, a shadow who both consoles and unsettles her. Until one day at the sea, both overwhelmed and replenished by the sun's vital heat, her perspective will abruptly change. And once again, I think this is an absolutely stunning cover. I'm very into looking at to see what the covers are looking like these days. Next, from Nancy Thayer, we have Family Reunion, which is coming on May 4th. And yes, this is hearkening that summer is coming. Eleanor Sunderland loves living on Nantucket in a gorgeous cliffside home that has been in her family for decades. Yet this year, she can't help but feel a little bit isolated, even as the island begins to come alive with summer tourists and travelers. Hoping to kick the season off on a good note, Eleanor decides that her 70th birthday may be the perfect occasion for a much-needed reunion. Fresh off the heels of her college graduation, Eleanor's dear granddaughter, Ari, heads to Nantucket to clear her head before graduate school, moving in with her grandmother and taking a job at the local beach camp. But just as grandmother and granddaughter fall into a carefree routine, a few shocking discoveries throw them off course, and their ideas of a future seem suddenly uncertain. So Nancy Thayer, Family Reunion. She lives on Nantucket. I may have already shared this story, so bear with me if I have. She lives near the beach, and she lives near a beach walk where a lot of people walk to, get onto the beach, their beach access. And she said she sits there and hears over the hedge a lot of stories and these little snippets, and they give her great ideas for stories and books of just these casual conversations. So if you're on Nantucket this summer and you're walking next to a really high hedge and you're just talking and sharing family secrets, just know there might be somebody behind you taking notes. Next, from Mary Kay Andrews, who's a big crowd pleaser for our readers, we've got The Newcomer. Note the sharks that are circling this woman in the water. After she discovers her sister Tanya dead on the floor of her fashionable New York City uptown house, Letty Carnahan is certain she knows who did it: Tanya's ex, sleazy real estate entrepreneur Evan Winkfield. Even in the grip of grief and panic, Letty heeds her late sister's warning about who's responsible for her death. anything bad happens to me, it's Evan. Promise me you'll take Maya and run. Promise me. So Letty grabs her sister's Mercedes and hits the road with Maya. So Letty sheds her old life and checks into an uncertain future at the Murmuring Surf Motel. Now, you always know if you're reading a Mary Kay Andrews book, we're going to have some kind of a setting there where everything's going to be a little off. It's not going to be really perfect, but it's going to be the place where a lot of the action is going to happen. The Surf, as the regulars call it, is the winter home of a close-knit flock of retirees and snowbirds who regard this odd duck newcomer with suspicion and downright hostility. As Letty settles into the motel's former storage room, she tries to heal Maya's heartache and unravel the key to her sister's shady past, all while dodging the attention of the owner's dangerously attractive son, Joe, who just happens to be the local police detective. So everybody's hiding something. What's going on? It's a new kind of cover treatment for MKA, as we call her, Mary Kay Andrews. And I want to know why those sharks are circling in the water. So there you go, May 4th. Next, we've got second. Let me just move this 1 second. Just move this thing right here. Hold on 1 second. Having trouble seeing the tops of the books. There we go. Second Place by Rachel Cusk. It's coming on May 4th. Here, a woman invites a famous artist to use her guest house in the remote coastal landscape where she lives with her family. Powerfully drawn to his paintings, she believes his vision might penetrate the mystery at the center of her life. But as a long, dry summer sets in, his provocative presence itself becomes an enigma and disrupts the calm of her secluded household. Rachel Cusk's electrifying new novel is a study of female fate and male privilege, the geometries of human relationships, and the moral questions that animate our lives. It reminds of art's capability to uplift and also to destroy. This is a really stunning cover. I think it looks like, just really looks like a fabulous painting and definitely draws you into the theme of the book. Next, we've got the Breakup Book Club that's coming from Wendy Wax on May 18th. And while this presentation is really cutting off at May 4th, we're sharing this because if you're paying attention to Spring Preview, this book is going to be offered as a contest title in the next couple of days. So you got to keep your eyes peeled for this one. So let's see what the Breakup Book Club is all about. On paper, Jasmine, Judith, Erin, and Sarah have little in common. They're very different people leading very different lives. And yet, at a book club meeting in a historic carriage house turned bookstore, they bond over a shared love of reading and more than a little wine. And anybody's in a book club knows more than a little wine is kind of a theme, as well as a growing realization that their lives are not turning out like they expected. With the help of books, laughter, and the joy of ever-evolving friendships, Jasmine, Judith, Erin, and Sarah find the courage to navigate new and surprising chapters of their lives as they seek their own versions of happily ever after. So you know that if Wendy's writing this book, it's going to have a lot of, you're going to get to know who these four characters are, and you're going to have to experience what they're reading and what they're doing in their book club. Wendy did join a book club in anticipation of writing this book and said it was like this wonderful experience because she was learning a lot from all the people in the book club as well. And in her recent newsletter, she talked about a lot of the books that she'd read too. So the Breakup Book Club. Next, we've got historical fiction, and we know this is a big crowd pleaser with our audience. First, we're starting out with Lady Be Good, The Life and Times of Dorothy Hale by Pamela Hamilton. This is a spring preview book. A little hint, contest this week, so pay attention. Lady Be Good transports us to the glittering, sumptuous era of the 1920s New York to follow the life of aspiring actress Dorothy Hale as she comes of age. Breaking societal rules and placed on women, Peck's bad girl of Pittsburgh society, love that, Peck's bad girl of society, leaves behind her privileged world for the bright lights of Broadway to chase her dream. From convent school debutante runway to Ziegfeld social girl to Hollywood star, she transforms herself into one of the most adored figures in the highest echelons of society. Yet behind the public facade, the darling of the press contends with heart-rending loss, gossip, and betrayal, and a tempestuous friendship with Luce. Dorothy finds her way to the other side of heartbreak and prepares for a White House wedding. And then suddenly, at age 33, at the height of happiness and the peak of her fame, she falls to her death. Her life story is revised and written into history by the tabloids, and she is famed and feted, leading to this novel's stunning conclusion. Absolutely stunning cover on this one. Next, from Karen White, we've got The Last Night in London. Karen put up a picture on her social media a week or so ago, and she had little dots all over the map. And since we're living in COVID times, I actually thought that was where people in London had COVID. I'm not kidding. And instead, it was all the places that had been bombed during World War II. And she had like a little drawing. It was really, completely harrowing to look at. And she had lived in London at one point and was pinpointing where she had lived in relation to what had gone on. This is coming on April 20th. It's London. It's 1939. Beautiful and ambitious Eva Harlow and her American best friend, Precious Dubose, are trying to make their way as fashion models. When Eva falls in love with Graham St. John, an aristocrat and Royal Air Force pilot, she can't believe her luck. She's getting everything she ever wanted. And then the Blitz devastates her world, and Eva finds herself slipping into a web of intrigue, spies, and secrets. All it takes is one unwary moment to change their lives forever. So now let's flash forward to London in 2019. American journalist Maddie Warner, whose life has been marked by a tragic loss of her mother, travels to London to interview Precious about her life in pre-World War II London. As Maddie gets closer to her, she begins to unravel Precious's haunting past, a story of friendship, betrayal, and the unremembered acts of kindness and love. So coming on April 20th, The Last Night in London. Another stunning cover. Next, from Maggie Shipstead, we've got The Great Circle, and this is the #1 indie next pick for May. It's coming on May 4th. After being rescued as infants from a sinking ocean liner in 1914, Marion and Jamie Graves are raised by their uncle in Missoula, Montana. There, after encountering a pair of barnstorming pilots passing through town in beat-up biplanes, Marion commences her lifelong love affair with flight. At 14, she drops out of school and finds an unexpected and dangerous patron in a wealthy bootlegger who provides a plane and subsidizes her lessons, an arrangement that will haunt her for the rest of her life, even as it allows her to fulfill her destiny, circumnavigating the globe by flying over the North and South Poles. A century later, Hadley Baxter is cast to play Marion in a film that centers on Marion's disappearance in Antarctica. Hadley is eager to redefine herself after a romantic film franchise has imprisoned her in the grip of cult celebrity. Her merging into the character of Marion unfolds thrillingly alongside Marion's own story as the women's fates and their hunger for self-determination in vastly different geographies and times collide. And I've always been transfixed by these women that were flying planes at that time and, heading over the North and South Pole. I think it's just, it's something that it's so out of the realm when I think of what most people were living their lives like at this point. I really am drawn to a story like this. Next, we've got The Last Green Valley by Mark Sullivan. You know him as the #1 best-selling author of Beneath a Scarlet Sky, which is one of my favorite books. And I'm reading The Last Green Valley right now. It's coming on May 4th. Here, Mark is once again mining a relationship that he made with someone in Bozeman, Montana. And those who know the story behind Beneath the Scarlet Sky, the story was actually brought to him by someone he knew in town, and they mentioned to him at a dinner party. And they said to him, I think this is a book that you'd want to write. I think it's a story you want to tell. Well, in Bozeman, Montana, he came across another story like this, the story of the Martell family. And he writes in his author's note, it was someplace that took place like so close to where he found the other story, a very, very sweeping story about another family's life and how they came to America. So it's late March 1944, as Stalin's forces push into the Ukraine. Young Emil and Adeline Martell must make a terrible decision. Do they wait for the Soviet bear's intrusion and risk being sent to Siberia? Or do they reluctantly follow the wolves, murderous Nazi officers who have pledged to protect pure blood Germans? And you actually need to have your papers to show that you're of German heritage. And in the book, they clearly outline what they have is their family Bible going back through years, all kinds of papers that they're carrying with them as they travel, because the goal is to get to Germany, even though it's still controlled by the Nazis, because it is a much better world to be living in than being back in the Soviet Union. They're one of many families of German heritage whose ancestors have farmed the Ukraine for more than a century. But after living under Stalin's horrifying regime, they decide they must run and retreat from their land with the wolves they despise to escape the Soviets and go in search of freedom. It's brutal, complex, and triumphant tale that illuminates the power of love, faith, and one family's incredible will to survive and see their dreams realized. All during the story, the mother is saying to the little boys that we're looking for our own Green Valley. We're looking for our own Green Valley. And you're going to find, I'm not giving anything away, that that's what they're finding when they're in Montana. So it's a beautifully written story. I'm learning a lot because as much as, oh gosh, I don't want to read another World War II story, this is a completely different perspective. Mark did a lot of research. He actually went to the Ukraine and he talks about his boots on the ground research to see the places where people had been. He was there with guards because it was a very dangerous place for Americans to be walking around. And I just think it's a very, very interesting story about history, that something I thought about but didn't know much about. Next, we've got The Most Beautiful Girl in Cuba, which is coming from Chanel Cleaton. It's coming on May 4th. A feud rages in Gilded Age New York City between newspaper tycoons William Randolph Hearst and Joseph Pulitzer. When Grace Harrington lands a job at Hearst's newspaper in 1896, she's caught up in a cutthroat world where one scoop can make or break your career. But it's a story emerging from Cuba that changes her life. Unjustly imprisoned in a notorious Havana women's jail, 18-year-old Evangelina Cisneros dreams of a Cuba free from Spanish oppression. When Hearst learns of her plight and splashes her image on the front page of his paper, proclaiming her the most beautiful girl in Cuba, she becomes a rallying cry for American intervention in the battle for Cuban independence. So for those of us who don't know that much about what's been going on in Cuba, it's definitely a book that you'll want to explore. Next, from Pam Jenoff, we've got The Woman with the Blue Star. Pam Jenoff is probably one of the preeminent writers about World War II and what happened, especially with the Jewish community during that time. And as much as people say I have World War II fatigue, I always find that Pam has a fresh look, a fresh idea, a fresh way to have us think about what happened during that time. So here it's 1942, and Sadie Galt is 18. She's living with her parents amid the horrors of the Krakow ghetto during World War II. When the Nazis liquidate the ghetto, Sadie and her pregnant mother are forced to seek refuge in the perilous sewers beneath the city. One day, Sadie looks up through a grate and sees a girl about her own age buying flowers. Ella is an affluent Polish girl living a life of relative ease with her stepmother, who's developed close alliances with the occupying Germans. Scorned by her friends and longing for her fiancé who has gone out to war, Ella wanders Krakow restlessly. While on an errand in the market, she captures a glimpse of something moving beneath a grate in the street. Upon closer inspection, she realizes it's a girl hiding. And Ella begins to aid Sadie, and the two become close. But as the dangers of war worsen, their lives are set on a collision course that will test them in the face of overwhelming odds. So that's The Woman with the Blue Star, coming on May 4th. Now we've got thrillers and mysteries, and oh, do we have a collection of these for you. First, from Sally Hepworth, it's just out this week. We've got The Good Sister. I am very interested in interviewing Sally. I interviewed her years ago. She lives in Australia. One of the best parts about the pandemic is we've got to figure out the time difference so I can try and interview Sally. All of her thrillers have been bets on selections. We actually had a contest to give away this book this week. And here's what we've got as a story. Fern Castle works in her local library. She has dinner with her twin sister, Rose, 3 nights a week. She carefully avoids crowds, bright lights, loud noises as much as possible. Fern has a carefully structured life, and disrupting her routine can be dangerous because she can fly off the handle. She's somewhere on the spectrum. And as a result, order is the way she runs her life. When Rose, her sister, discovers that she cannot get pregnant, Fern sees a chance to pay her sister back for everything that Rose has done for her. Fern can have a baby for Rose. She just needs to find a father. And that's going to be simple, right? So Fern's mission will shake the foundations of the life she's carefully built for herself. Because believe me, as we all know, if you're going to become a mother, nothing is going to sit and go your way during that pregnancy or anything. You're kind of like at somebody else's will and hands. And so everything she's carefully built, and it's going to stir up some dark secrets from the past, things that what really did happen back then. It's rich, it's quirky, and it's got a shocking story of unexpected love. Sally was actually drawn to write this book. She has two young daughters. If you follow her on Instagram, there's a lot of fun to follow, especially the little one, who is just a riot. They're just, it's such a fun kid. And she watched the two of them squabbling at one point, and she said something about like, wait, what are you guys doing? And they said, well, of course we love each other. We're sisters. And here we're looking at the darker side of sisterhood. And she says, everybody has a dark side. Sally's so good at bringing them out. From Paula McLain, we've got When the Stars Go Dark, and that is also out this week. You always knew Paula for her historical fiction. She wrote The Paris Wife. I'm going to space all the other books she's done, but Paula is the author who has really done a great job of mining historical fiction. This is a complete departure for her. It's a thriller. And here we've got Anna Hart is a seasoned missing persons detective in San Francisco with far too much knowledge of the darkest side of human nature. When tragedy strikes her personal life, Anna, desperate and numb, flees to the Northern California village of Mendocino to grieve. She lived there as a child with her beloved foster parents, and now she believes it might be the only place left for her. Yet the day she arrives, she learns that a local teenage girl has gone missing, and automatically it spurs all kinds of ideas with her. It was reminiscent of one of the most crucial times in her childhood when the unsolved murder of a young girl touched Mendocino and changed the community forever. She becomes obsessed with saving the missing girl, and she has to accept that the true courage may be getting out of her own way and learning to let others in. Because this woman, I've been reading this book, I'm about halfway through, and we don't know what she's fled. We don't know why she's gone, but at the same time, she's on the run. And what is she feeling? What is she doing as a result of being in the situation? Paula is very upfront about her years of being a foster child. She was, her parents abandoned her when she was very young with her sisters and her siblings, and they moved to a number of places, and all of them were not really that great. And there was one that was particularly rough. And she wrote a Modern Love column about that a couple of weeks ago. And there's been another profile about her journey in the New York Times. So this book is a very different direction for her. We don't know if this is going to be a recurring character or if she's going to continue in this genre. I heard her interviewed by Kristen Hanna the other night, and things are sort of up in the air, but she does know she's found a comfort zone in writing thrillers. Next, we've got from David Baldacci, A Gambling Man, which is coming on April 20th. The 1950s are on the horizon, and World War II veteran Aloysius Archer is in dire need of a fresh start after a nearly fatal detour in Polka City. So Archer hops on a bus and begins the long journey out west to California, where rumor has it there's money to be made if you're hardworking, lucky, criminal, or all three. Along the way, Archer stops in Reno, where a stroke of fortune delivers him a wad of cash, an eye-popping, blood-red 1939 Delahaye convertible, plus a companion for the final leg of the journey, an aspiring actress named Liberty Callahan, who's planning to try her luck in Hollywood. But when the two arrive in Baytown, California, Archer quickly discovers that the hordes of people who flock there seeking fame and fortune landed in a false paradise that instead caters to their worst addictions and fears. So there we've got A Gambling Man from David Baldacci. Next, from Robert Dugoni, who's a longtime author that we all love on Book Reporter, we've got In Her Tracks, and it's the latest in his Tracy Crosswhite series, coming on April 20th. Returning from an extended leave in her hometown of Cedar Grove, Detective Tracy Crosswhite finds herself reassigned to the Seattle PD's cold case unit. As the protective mother of an infant daughter, Tracy is immediately drawn in to her first file, the abduction of a 5-year-old girl whose parents, embattled in a poisonous divorce, were once prime suspects. While reconstructing the days leading up to the girl's disappearance, Tracy is brought into an active investigation with her former partner, Kensington Rowe. A young woman has vanished on an isolated jogging trail in North Seattle. Divided between the two cases, which both are critical, Tracy has little to go on except the treacherous deceptions behind a broken marriage, and now the secrets hiding behind the closed doors of a deceptively quiet middle-class neighborhood. This is the latest in the Tracy Crosswhite series. If any of you have read them before or anybody wants to discover a new series, lots of books to be able to go explore. Next, we've got Mirrorland by Carol Johnston. It's coming on April 20th. Kat lives in LA, far away from 36 Westerick Road, the imposing Gothic house in Edinburgh, where she and her estranged twin sister Elle grew up. As girls, they invented Mirrorland, a dark imaginary place under the pantry stairs, full of pirates, witches, and clowns. These days, Kat rarely thinks about her childhood home or the fact that Elle is now living there with her husband, Ross. But when Elle mysteriously disappears after going out on her sailboat, Kat is forced to return to 36 Westerick Road, which has scarcely changed in 20 years. The grand old house, you can feel this house is creepy, is full of shadowy corners, and at every turn, Kat finds herself stumbling on long-held secrets and terrifying ghosts from the past. Because someone, said Elle, has left clues in almost every room, a treasure hunt that leads back to Mirrorland, where she knows the truth lies crouched and waiting. I heard the author speak about this book, and it's actually based on her grandmother's home, this big creaky old house where she said there was drafts all over the place, and it was just very creepy to be living in. Yet she described to her mother what she thought has something that happened at this home, and this little pantry and where the door led, and her mother goes, no, none of that existed, which just shows how our own memories of childhood may not exactly hold up on what actually happened at the time. So it's one of those books where it's going to go back and forth between these two sisters, what has happened. And it was reminding me of the book that I read last summer by Rose Carlisle, which also was about twin sisters that were at odds with one another. Next, we've got The Perfect Daughter, which is coming from DJ Palmer. Those of you who read The New Husband and enjoyed it last year, well, this is definitely a book that you want to take a look at. Penny Francone, age 16, is a murderer. Her guilt is beyond doubt. She was found alone in the victim's apartment, covered in blood, holding the murder weapon. The victim's identity and her secret relationship to Penny give Penny the perfect motive, sealing the deal. All the jury needs to decide now is where Penny will serve out her sentence. Will she be found not guilty by reason of insanity, as her lawyer wants to argue, or will she get life sentence in a maximum security prison? As Penny awaits trial in a state mental hospital, she's treated by Dr. Mitchell McHugh, a psychiatrist battling demons of his own. Grace's determination to understand why behind her daughter's terrible crime fuels Mitch's resolve to help the Francone family. Together, they set out in search of the truth about Penny, but discover instead a shocking hidden history of secrets, lies, and betrayal that threatens to consume them all. So is she Ruby? Is she Penny? Is she Chloe? Or is she lying? Great cover. Coming April 20th. Next, we've got Linwood Barclay's Find You First. And anybody who knows how much I love Linwood Barclay's books will not be surprised that this book is in this presentation. It's Book Reporter Bets on Selection, and it's going to be one of our summer reading titles. Our summer reading promotion is going to be kicking off on April 30th with the first contest happening on May 4th. Here we've got tech millionaire Miles Cookson has more money than he ever could spend and everything he could dream of except time. He's recently been diagnosed with a terminal illness, and there's a 50% chance that can be passed along to the next generation. For Miles, it means it's time to take a hard look at the past. 2 decades ago, young, struggling Miles was a sperm donor. So somewhere out there, he has kids, 9 of them. And as he begins to search for the children he's never known, aspiring film documentarian Chloe Swanson embarks on a quest to find her biological father, armed with the knowledge that 22 years ago, her mother used a New York sperm bank to become pregnant. So Miles and Chloe connect, because he really wants to be able to find these 9 kids. He wants to be able to tell them, look, this is something that could happen to you. Go out and get tested, and maybe give them some of his money as well. But one by one, his other potential heirs are vanishing, every trace of them wiped, like they never existed at all. Who is the vicious killer? And another heir methodically erasing rivals, or is there something even more sinister going on? Stephen King absolutely loves Linwood Barclay's books. Starts with a bang, it ends with even bigger one. It's the best book of his career. I couldn't put it down. And I am a longtime reader of Linwood's. It is definitely his best book. It's got a lot less of joking humor that we've always, this kind of slapsticky kind of stuff that Linwood does. And instead, it's got this story that is going to flip you back and forth because you're going to meet these 9 kids, but you're going to meet them in a very different way. So there you go. Find you first. Next, we got Hour of the Witch by Chris Bohjalian coming on May 4th. In case everybody hasn't figured out, because I keep saying the name May 4th, what have you all learned from coming to these previews? The first Tuesday of the book has a lot of books that come out. So in this case, it's May 4th. We've got Boston at 1662. Mary Deerfield is 24 years old. Her skin is porcelain, her eyes Delft blue, and in England, she might have had many suitors. But here in the New World, amid this community of saints, she's the second wife of Thomas Deerfield, a man as cruel as he is powerful. When Thomas, prone to drunken rage, drives a 3-tined fork into the back of Mary's hand, she resolves that she must divorce him to save her life. But in a world where every neighbor is watching for signs of the devil, a woman like Mary, a woman who harbors secret desires and finds it difficult to tolerate the brazen hypocrisy of so many men in the community, soon becomes the object of suspicion and rumor. When tainted objects are discovered buried in Mary's garden, when the boy she has treated with herbs and simples dies, and when their servant girl runs screaming in fright from her home, Mary must fight to escape not only her marriage, but also the gallows. So there's Hour of the Witch from Chris Bohjalian. Next from Laura Dave, we've got The Last Thing He Told Me. I read this book. I loved it. It's so different from anything that Laura wrote. I think I might have shared with you last time that when Laura wrote this book, she read her editor and she says, the book that you bought and the one that you think I'm writing, well, actually, I'm writing something different. And her editor took that gulp that editors do when they hear news like that and said, okay, I want to see what you're writing. So she went on and wrote The Last Thing He Told Me, which is just so well done. Before Owen Michaels disappears, he manages to smuggle a note to his beloved wife of just a year. Protect her. Despite her confusion and fear, Hannah Hall knows exactly to whom the note refers. Owen's 16-year-old daughter, Bailey. Bailey, who lost her mother tragically as a child. Bailey, who wants absolutely nothing to do with her new stepmother. As Hannah's increasingly desperate calls to Owen go unanswered, as the FBI arrests Owen's boss, as a U.S. Marshal and FBI agents arrive at her Sausalito home unannounced, Hannah quickly realizes that her husband isn't who he said he was, and that Bailey may just hold the key to figuring out Owen's true identity and why he really disappeared. Hannah and Bailey set out to discover the truth together, but as they start putting together the pieces of Owen's past, they soon realize that they're also building a new future, one neither of them could have anticipated. They live in these houseboats on the water at the beginning of the book, and it made me dream of living in a houseboat, which I probably know would be something that would be fun until what happens in the book where it starts to flood. So there goes that dream shattered. But for a couple moments, a couple pages, it sounded like a really great thing. Next from Andy Weir, we've got Project Hail Mary. This is the author of The Martian. Ryland Grace is a sole survivor on a desperate last chance mission. And if he fails, humanity and the earth itself will perish. Except that right now, he doesn't know that. Can't even remember his own name, let alone the nature of his assignment or how to complete it. And yep, he's up in space. His crewmates are dead. His memories fuzzily returning. He realizes an impossible task now confronts him. Hurtling through space on this tiny ship, it's up to him to puzzle out an impossible scientific mystery and conquer an extinction-level threat to our species. And with the clock ticking down and the nearest human being light years away, he has to do it all alone. Or does he? It's interesting. I heard Andy talking about this book last week, and he got into the science. He was into physics. He was into topics that, like, those are the classes I skipped when I was in school. Andy was way into all this, and he was actually being interviewed by a librarian who was in the physics department of a university. And it was just like this conversation. I realized I was in over my head, and really why I was not the math and science girl, but I was like the English one came to light. So the fact that Andy can speak that well about silence and can still write best-selling novels, hats off to him. Next, we've got Ruby Falls by Deborah Goodrich Royce. This is both a spring preview title, and you're going to see it again in summer reading. Little heads up. So it's coming on May 4th. On a brilliantly sunny July day, 6-year-old Ruby is abandoned by her father in a suffocating dark of a Tennessee cave. 20 years later, transformed into a soap opera star, Eleanor Russell, she's fired under dubious circumstances. Fleeing to Europe, she marries a glamorous stranger named Orlando Montague and keeps her past closely hidden. Together, Eleanor and Orlando start fresh in LA. Setting up house in a Storybrooke cottage in the Hollywood Hills, Eleanor is cast in a dream role, the lead in a remake of Rebecca. As she immerses herself into that eerie Gothic tale, Orlando's personality changes, ghosts of her past reemerge, and Eleanor feels that she's not the only person in her marriage with a secret. And yes, this is a homage to Rebecca. So there it is, Ruby Falls. We're going to do some memoirs, biographies, and nonfiction. First book intrigued me. It's out this week. It's called Empire of Pain, The Secret History of the Sackler Dynasty. Jesse Kornbluth, who founded Bookreporter with me 25 years ago this year, actually wrote about this book the other day, and he was talking about the Temple of Dendur, which is at the Met, and how many people have been there. And the room was funded by Arthur Sackler. And he says, like, you're sitting in this place of art. Let's talk about the darker side of what was going on with this man. It begins with the stories of 3 doctor brothers, Raymond, Mortimer, and the incalculably energetic Arthur, who weathered the poverty of the Great Depression and appalling anti-Semitism. Arthur devised the marketing for Valium and built the first Sackler fortune. He purchased a drug manufacturer, Purdue Frederick, which would be run by Raymond and Mortimer. The brothers began collecting art, wives, and grand residences in exotic locales. Their children and grandchildren grew up in luxury. 40 years later, Raymond's son Richard ran the family-owned Purdue. The template Arthur Sackler created to sell Valium, co-opting doctors, influencing the FDA, downplaying the drug's addictiveness, was employed to launch a far more potent product, OxyContin. The drug went on to generate some $35 billion in revenue and launch a public health crisis in which hundreds of thousands would die. And this is the story of the family, the Empire of Pain, and the whole dynasty that was created. And I include it in the presentation because I think it's a topic that's of interest. And I think that Patrick Radden Keefe has done a very good job of trying to explain exactly what this family did all those years. Next, from Lorenzo Carcaterra, we've got 3 Dreamers. And I had the pleasure of hearing Lorenzo speak about this book. He's written a lot of thrillers, written a lot of crime novels through the years, but this is a memoir of family, and it's out on April 27th. At 66, Lorenzo Carcaterra finds it easier to reflect on the past than ruminate on the future. By the time you reach my age, he writes, you've witnessed too much loss to not be aware of what lies ahead. This turn to the past inspired a poignant memoir about the women who made him the man he is today. His Italian grandmother, Nonna Maria, gives him his first taste of a loving home during the summers he spent with her as a teenager on Ischia, an island off the coast of Naples. His mother, Raffaella, dealt with daily hardships, a loveless and abusive marriage, the burden of death, and a life of dread. And the third woman is his wife, Susan, a gifted editor and his professional champion. She was the one that said, you are a writer, you are somebody, and she gave him so much, support. Their marriage lasted 3 decades before her death from lung cancer in 2013. And what he explores is these 3 dreamers of women and what they've brought to his life and how they made him the man he is today. And next, we've got Sunshine Girl from Juliana Margulies. Is coming on May 4th. As an apple-cheeked, bubbly girl, she was bestowed with the family nickname Sunshine Girl. I'm singing a little hands like that. Shuttled back and forth between her divorced parents, often on different continents, she quickly learned how to be of value to her eccentric mother and her absent father. Raised in fairly unconventional ways in various homes in Paris, England, New York, and New Hampshire, she found that her role among the surrounding turmoil and uncertainty was to comfort those around her, seeking organization among disorder, making her way in the world as a young adult, and eventually an award-winning actress. And I always find that the pieces, the parts that she plays are very exacting. Remember in The Good Wife, it's like in a very, very exacting ways that she's acting. So it's Unexpected Life, Sunshine Girls, May 4th. And now we're going to give you some June titles to look forward to. And we're going to confess we got a little more carried away than we usually do on bringing you June titles because there's a lot to look forward to. And we want you to be in the know. So we're going to start with Ellen Hildebrand's Golden Girl. And I am showing this one because I think this is an absolutely stunningly beautiful cover. Reminds me of like the Sooley cover back with John Grisham with the coloring. I don't know, I'm into this shade. You can't really see in my office here, but my walls here are painted copper. Really, it's metallic paint and it reflects. And I'm absolutely crazy about this. And years ago, I had a friend, and just getting the little side story here, who painted her walls with this stucco kind of stuff. And it was coffee. And the whole house smelled like coffee. I mean, you woke up in the morning, you were like caffeinated, just waking up in the house. And I remember my husband turned to her and said, what are you going to do when you want to paint over this? She says, we're going to move. So when I did these walls, my husband goes, what if you ever change what you want to do in this room? I said, we'll have to move because I really love this metallic walls and painting over them is going to be a bear. So that's my little personal aside. Let's go back to this book that's coming on June 1st. On a perfect June day, Vivian Howe, author of 13 beach novels and mother of three nearly grown children, is killed in a hit-and-run accident while jogging near her home on Nantucket. She ascends to the beyond, where she is signed to a person named Martha, who allows Vivi to watch what happens below for one last summer. Vivi is also granted 3 nudges to change the outcome of events on Earth. And with her daughter, Willa, on her 3rd miscarriage, Carson partying until all hours, and Leo currently off again with his high-maintenance girlfriend, she'll have to think carefully about how to use her 3 nudges. From the beyond, she watches the chief, Ed Capanash, investigate her death. But her greatest worry is that her final book, which contains a secret from her own youth, could be disastrous for her reputation. So when hidden truths come to light, Vivi's family will have to sort out their past and present mistakes, with or without a nudge from above, while Vivi finally lets them grow without her. So there we've got Golden Girl from Ellen Hildebrand. Then we've got Malibu Rising coming from Taylor Jenkins Reid. And so many people know this book, know her as the author of Daisy Jones and the Six. This is coming on June 1st. I was sent a copy the other day. People are saying you just want to read this now. In Malibu, it's 1983. It's the day of Nina Riva's annual end of summer party, and anticipation is at a fever pitch. Everyone wants to be at the famous Riva's house. Nina, the talented surfer and supermodel. Brothers Jay and Hud, one a champion surfer, the other a renowned photographer, and their adored baby sister Kit. Together, the siblings are the source of fascination in Malibu and the world over, especially as the offspring of legendary singer Mick Riva. By midnight, the party will be completely out of control. By morning, the Riva mansion will have gone up in flames. But before that first spark in the early dawn, hours before dawn, the alcohol will flow, the music will play, and the loves and secrets that shaped this family generations will all come rising to the surface. So here we've got Malibu Rising. Very funny. Years ago, I was friends with her. I'm still friends with a woman named Katie Arnaldi. She's an author. She invited me out to her home in Malibu when I was out for, I believe it was one of the book expos. And she says, come out to my house. And her house was solid glass on both sides, overlooking the water in Malibu. So when I drove down the driveway, I basically could see the ocean through her house, which was just absolutely spectacular and incredible. And I thought of that just looking at the cover of this book, because what she said is everybody was out surfing on the water outside her house. And she goes, look at this. Everyone's doing yoga on the water outside my house. All these people come, they're in my backyard every single day. And I've always remembered that story because it was just so funny of her describing what would happen. And I also remember her house was solid glass on either side. And she said that the floors were concrete. So if they had to do any work like in the backyard, she'd open up the doors and the trucks could go right through that part of the house out to the back. It was one of those places where you're in the gated community of Malibu. There's all these secrets, everything's going on. I was just thinking about that house and wanting to get back to there when I was thinking about reading Malibu Rising. It's funny because her father had bought the house in the 50s, and there was an original little house that they'd stayed in, which was a typical, beach bungalow. It was on the property, and that's actually where I stayed. And it was just like this fabulous setting. I would like to go sit, if I ever wanted to go out and write a novel, just sit there with the water hitting up against the surf below, and sit there and do that. And she actually had the last grandfathered surf shack on the beach. So I'm thinking of all these memories, and I want to see which ones I create again with Taylor's book. Next, we've got The Other Black Girl, which is coming from Sadiqa Dahlia Harris. It's coming on June 1st. This is a book that's highly anticipated. A lot of buzz is going on about it. She actually was someone who did work in publishing. She worked at a publisher as a publicist for a very long time. So it's interesting when somebody leaves the flock. It's like, oh my gosh, is it going to be one of those Devil Wears Prada kind of moments? Well, we're going to see a little bit of it, though she's not really talking about her co-workers. In this, 26-year-old editorial assistant Nella Rogers is tired of being the only Black employee at Wagner Books. Fed up with the isolation of microaggressions, she's thrilled when Harlem-born and bred Hazel starts working in the cubicle beside hers. They've only just started comparing natural hair regimens, that when a string of uncomfortable events elevates Hazel to office darling, and Nella's left in the dust. Then notes begin to appear on Nella's desk. Leave Wagner now. It's hard to believe Hazel is behind these hostile messages, but as Nella starts to spiral and obsess over sinister forces at play, she soon realizes that there's a lot more at stake here than just her career. It's a really interesting story because we're also looking at this, besides being a story of being the only Black girl, it's being the assistant. It reminds me of my Condé Nast days when you were new at the job, and all you want to do is you wanted to get to be the assistant editor, or you wanted to be the assistant in any kind of a department and move yourself up. And now somebody else comes in and they're moving ahead and you're not. And it's very typical of what you find in early jobs with people that are starting out. But here it's like the stakes are even higher because we're also looking at the subject of race and what's happening with her, because she used to be the only person and the one that they say, well, what do you think? And now there's somebody else in the room as well. The Other Black Girl, coming June 1st. Next, we've got Our Women in Moscow by Beatrice Williams, which is coming also on June 1st. In the autumn of 1848, Iris Digby vanishes from her London home with her American diplomat husband, Sasha Digby, and their 2 children. The world is shocked by the family's sensational disappearance. Were they eliminated by Soviet intelligence service, or have they defected to Moscow with a trove of the West's most vital secrets? 4 years later, Ruth McAllister receives a postcard from Iris, her twin, who she hasn't seen since their catastrophic parting in Rome in the summer of 1940, as war engulfed the continent, and Iris fell desperately in love with Sasha. Within days, Ruth is on her way to Moscow, posing as the wife of counterintelligence agent Sumner Fox in a precarious plot to extract the Digbys from behind the Iron Curtain. So we've got Our Women in Moscow from Beatrice Williams. Next, we've got The Maidens, which is coming from Alex Michaelides on June 15th. Now, you all know him, I hope you know him, as the author of The Silent Patient. And yes, this is the eagerly anticipated second book from Alex. Edward Fosca is a murderer. Of this, Mariana is certain, but Fosca is untouchable. A handsome and charismatic Greek tragedy professor at Cambridge University, Fosca is adored by his staff and students alike, particularly by the members of a secret society of female students known as the Maidens. Mariana Andros is a brilliant but troubled group therapist who's become fixated on the Maidens when one member, a friend of Mariana's niece Zoe, is found murdered in Cambridge. Mariana, who was once herself a student at the university, quickly suspects something sinister. She becomes convinced that, despite his alibi, Fosca is guilty of the murder. But why would the professor target one of his students? When another body is found, Mariana's obsession with proving Fosca's guilt spirals out of control, threatening to destroy her credibility as well as her closest relationships. but she's determined to stop this killer, even if it costs her everything, including her life. From former interviews with Alex, know that he grew up on Cyprus. He grew up reading Greek tragedies. That was what kids did. They sat on the beach there and were reading Greek tragedies. And once again, that is influencing this work as well. I'm looking forward to interviewing him probably sometime in June. Next, we've got Morningside Heights from Joshua Henkin coming on June 15th. If you see this book listed as coming out last year, it was a book that was supposed to come out last year, was what I call pandemically held for this year. When Ohio-born Prue Steiner arrives in New York in 1976, after graduating from Yale, she follows a long tradition of young people determined to take the city by storm. But when she falls in love with Spence Robin, her hotshot young Shakespeare professor, her life takes a turn she couldn't have anticipated. 30 years later, something's wrong with Spence. The great man can't concentrate. He falls asleep reading the New York Review of Books. With their daughter Sarah away at medical school, Prue struggles on her own. One day, feeling particularly isolated, Prue meets a man, and the possibility of new romance blooms. Meanwhile, Spence's estranged son from his first marriage has come back into their lives. Arlo, a wealthy entrepreneur who invests in biotech, may be his father's last best hope about how far into the darkness you're willing to go to claim the life you always wanted. Morningside Heights from Joshua Higgins is getting a ton of praise. I've had it on my shelf since last year. Joshua was a terrific writer. Last book, I think it was Matrimony, was his last book that I completely enjoyed. So looking forward to reading this. I basically need a clone that reads, and then somebody else who writes the newsletter and does everything else that I do all day long to bring books to you, because I've got these shelves over here. They're groaning with books that I'm dying to be reading right now, and there's just not enough time. And then we've got The Personal Librarian, which is coming from Marie Benedict and Victoria Christopher Murray. This is something different because Marie, who you know has written so many great books of historical fiction, is writing with someone else. In the 1920s, Belle DaCosta Green is hired by J.P. Morgan to curate a collection of rare manuscripts, books, and artwork for his newly built Pierpont Morgan Library. Belle becomes a fixture on the New York society scene and one of the most powerful people in the art and book world, known for her impeccable taste and shrewd negotiating for critical works as she helps build a world-class collection. But Belle has a secret, one she must protect at all costs. She was not born Belle DaCosta Green, but Belle Marion Greener. She's the daughter of Richard Greener, the first Black graduate of Harvard and a well-known advocate for equality. Belle's complexion isn't dark because of her alleged Portuguese heritage that lets her pass as white. Her complexion is dark because she is African American. So here's what we've got is the story Personal Librarian. You know that Maria does such a great job with historical fiction, and to see her writing this book with a co-author, a story that we really didn't know anything about, once again, I think we're looking at a treasure. That's it for books that we've got coming up. Here we've got our Mother's Day contest where we're giving away 15 books. 5 people are going to win all 15 of these books. Contest just went up on Monday. You can go out and enter on the site. You can only enter once. Believe me, entering more times is not going to do anything except give us a headache because we're going to have to take your name out for more than once. So definitely go out and enter to win. We've got fabulous books here. We've got books here that people have been talking about. We've got The Rose Code. We've got Hieroglyphics, Float Plan. Just so many books, The Winds Are Not. One of these is better than the next. We've also got a trilogy, The Art of Hearing Heartbeats, The Well-Tempered Heart, and The Heart Remembers, a trilogy of books that are written by one author. So you're actually going to walk away with a complete reading experience as well. So the contest is open till Friday, May 7th at noon. And then for spring preview, in case you don't remember what all the books are that we've done this time, this is this year's featured titles. Leave it on here for a moment. Lots and lots of great reading in this collection of books that we've been giving away. We've got the rest of this week and next week, and then we will pick up with summer reading from one contest into the next. Also, these are my bets on selections so far this year. Remember, I never go into the year saying how many bets ons I'm going to pick. We sit there and sort of figure it out as time goes on. It's been an exceptional year for reading. There's so many books I'm looking forward to adding to this list, but these are my bets on selections. Also, our What's Your Book Group, our Book Reporter Talk To videos and podcasts are on YouTube and wherever you listen to podcasts. So you can either watch or listen, whichever one you're interested in. We've got a really good collection of authors that we've done recently with Chris Whitaker with We Begin at the End, Nadia Hashimi, Sparks Like Stars, Alexander Andrews with Who is Maud Dixon, Gabriela Garcia with Of Women in Salt, The Power Couple with Alex Berenson, and Lisa Gardner Before She Disappeared. And just added this week, I didn't have time to add it to the slide, is the one, the interview with Lisa Scottolini. So we've actually been building a really nice audience on these. I think we have 1,180 subscribers to our YouTube channel, which doesn't make us quite the Kardashians, but I think in the book world, we can become real mavens. So what we'd love you to do is share this with other librarians, your librarians, booksellers, and your fellow readers, because the more that we can build up our audience here, the more that we will be able to get traction and interview more authors. Also, as you remember, we helped produce the Morristown Festival of Books, and I did 2 interviews for those events. We've flipped those into podcasts. My interview with Kristen Hanna just went up last week, and we really got in depth about the 4 wins and her career. And then Nadia Owusu, who is the debut author of Aftershocks. These are available on our podcast for videos. You have to go to Morristown Festival of Books to watch them there. It's a festival that I've been connected with for a number of years, so it's fun to be able to share this with you. Next week, we will have our next Bookaccino live event. It's the event we were supposed to have in March, but Kim had a dental emergency and had to cancel with us. So we're going to do this on Thursday, April 22nd, which actually is Kim's anniversary, but she picked the night, folks, and she wants to get together with us to discuss The Book Woman of Troublesome Creek. These events have become so popular that we had a room of 500 that was seated for 500. We've actually increased the room to 1,000. And there are over 900 people signed up to do this event, which makes us really happy that you've embraced what we're doing like this over the past year. I mean, we started out with, we didn't even know what Zoom was, and look what we've built at this point. So the more that you can share about these monthly events that we're doing with your friends, whatever, the more we're going to be appreciative of as well. And our next Bookaccino live event will be on Wednesday, May 12th at 2 o'clock. It'll be May 11th through June 1st events. And we're going to give you a peek ahead at July. Sign up will be available on the site later today. I also be sending everybody who attends the event live today a link to enter our Bookaccino, our Survey Monkey, where you actually will tell us which books of, you will go to Survey Monkey. You will not, I'm not right there. You go to Survey Monkey, tell us the 5 books, or the books that, all the books that you're most interested in reading. And next month, we'll share what the top 5 books are. Everyone, thank you so much for joining us. This means a lot to us, really matters a lot to us that you come and enjoy this. And we look forward to next time.